Welcome to CMO Huddles Studios. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. The old proverb that every journey begins with a single step sounds simple enough, right? Unless, of course, you're a marketer and we're talking about buyer journeys. Then identifying the first step on the journey is the subject of endless speculation and debate. When did that prospect first realize they had a problem that your product or service might solve? And once they realized they had a problem, how did they find your particular solution? Was there a moment of truth that sparked interest in your solution or a series of little triggers? Did they drop by your booth at a trade show randomly, or had some other activity of yours triggered interest when they were at that trade show? Did they find you on Google? And if so, were there activities that predispose them to click on your content? Or did they just hear about your solution from a peer and decide to investigate? Or was it an analyst report? I mean, my head spins when I really start to think about this topic of top of the funnel. So, and all these things could be happening independently. But fortunately for you, we have 3 seasoned CMOs here to share how they tackle the challenge of top of the funnel strategically, tactically, and from a metrics perspective. And one other note I have to moment, because all of our guests happen to be men today. CMO Huddles is not a boys club. And just for your reference, in about an hour and a half, we're recording a bonus huddle with Dahlia Feldheim, the author of Dare to Lead Like a Girl. And we've had many episodes where we had 3 women. So with that, let's bring on Jeff Morgan, head of marketing at Elements, which is a financial planning system. Hello, Jeff. How are you and where are you?
Doing really great today. Thanks for having me, Drew. I am in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So just to get started, give us a brief description of Elements.
Great. So Elements is a venture-funded, early-stage B2B SaaS startup, and our solution helps financial advisors quickly demonstrate early value to their prospects so they can convert more of their leads into new clients.
Interesting. So in some ways, you're providing a top of the funnel solution to your customers, right? Which is kind of cool. So I'm really counting on your expertise here. How do you define top of the funnel at Elements?
Yeah, so interesting thing about that is that we're constantly trying to explain that we're not a top of funnel tool to our prospective clients, and that we're trying to help them to convert existing leads into new clients rather than like we're a lead generation service. So we're kind of sitting in the middle of funnel,
Okay.
bottom of funnel,
Good.
top of funnel. So that might help to define, I guess, how we think of top of funnel at Elements as well.
So, yeah, all right. So for your customers, you're out there, you're helping them. Somebody's already discovered them, and then now they have to process that and help convert that over time. Okay.
Demonstrating value to their prospective clients is all about what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go back to how you define top of the funnel. How do these financial service advisors, or FAs, I guess, how do they find you, discover you, and what do you look at when you think of top of the funnel?
Yeah, so I really think top of funnel to me is where during the buyer's journey, members of our target audience are still unaware or just becoming aware of our solutions. So really the goal for us at that stage is like kind of threefold. So first, we're trying to build brand awareness with our target audiences. And that includes primarily our ICP, but also industry influencers, prospective employees, prospective investors. 2, we're trying to develop credibility and trust with those target audiences. And then the third thing is that we're trying to help our ICP in particular identify the challenges that they have that are specifically related to the solutions that we offer. We're trying to help them feel a sense of urgency to discover new solutions to the problems that they're facing. We're trying to help them associate our brand as a credible source for helpful information. And we're also trying to get them to feel an affinity for our brand and our mission and our team.
So that's a lot that's happening.
Yeah.
Before they would be defined as an opportunity, right? So and so we've got awareness. They have to understand that both have a problem that they have and that the solution that right? They have to understand there's a problem. And then they have to understand that you are a provider of a solution, and that you're a credible provider of that. And then ultimately that you can help them get there. How That's a lot, right? And that's a lot. So do you have a sense of which marketing programs specifically feed your top of the funnel?
Yeah. Yeah. So the way that I think of a top of funnel program is really all about building audiences. So it's a way for us to communicate with our target audiences in a one-to-many fashion on a regular basis, where they keep coming back for more. And that way we can like hit on all of those objectives that I kind of mentioned. So for us, right now, the three primary content channels that we're using to accomplish that are a weekly podcast, a weekly email newsletter, and then daily social media posts that have educational content included in those posts. So growing an audience really requires more, though, than just like producing the content. So we really have a bunch of promotional strategies that we're using to build that audience. So what we found the most effective way for each one of those to build the audience is really by promoting in the same channel. So if it's our podcast, we're promoting our podcast through third-party podcasts that have the same audience as us. If we're building our social following, then we're doing paid social campaigns to increase our followers, and we're partnering up with with industry influencers that have a great social presence. On our newsletter, we're promoting our newsletter via other industry pubs that have our same audience, so that we're really leveraging other people's audiences to grow our own. And then we also find that cross promotion works really well. So like we'll promote our podcast on our social groups, we'll promote our newsletter on our podcast, and all of the different ways of cross promoting with our own audience.
And one point I'm just going to put a pin in is, so you have all these sort of, we'll call them content marketing activities, podcast, email, social, that are all designed to educate, but you have to market the marketing. You can't just do that and expect discovery. So that, in a way, the marketing of the marketing is really, that's the highest level of the, if you will, that's almost pre-funnel, where you're building this, growing the audience. So, I've had a podcast for 6 years, and I know that podcasts, like, one of the jokes if you've written a book is that podcasts don't sell books, which is interesting, right? It's very hard to sell, but they do a lot of other things. They build credibility and so forth. Do you have a sense, and this is, I know, the sort of magic question in the boardroom, of which of the top of funnel activities, if we call podcast, email, and social, as top of the funnel activities, which sort of help get you deeper into the pipeline? Do you have any sense of, podcast is great for this, but it doesn't get to opportunity?
Yeah, well, what we found is in our pre-demo surveys, we asked people, how did you hear about us? And like over 30% of the people that have scheduled a demo have also listened to our podcast, and that's self-reported. So, I think that the podcast of those three things that we're doing is probably the most influential in getting in achieving those goals before we start converting them into demos and like actual leads. And that's just because the audience is the biggest there. And I think that we just do a good job of intermixing our calls to action into the beginning and end of the podcast, and people eventually find their way to the demo form, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's making me wonder, okay, where did I go wrong with the podcast? But But it's
selling
interesting.
books is different than demos, right?
Yes, it's true. It's true, and it's much more of a direct line. But that's really interesting that the podcast of all of those, and it makes sense to me in one sense, is when someone listens to a podcast, they're giving you a fair amount of time, and they're also often doing it when they're not in the office, they're working out, they're trying to educate themselves. So they're really, and if you blow it, you don't get another chance. So you really have to be good at it. And so obviously, kudos to you for having a podcast. One last question on that, and then we'll move on to Andrés. But what is there anything in terms of the podcasts that you've learned that have helped your build it? Like, what kind of frequency is your podcast? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's a weekly podcast, and we're really religious about making sure that it happens every single week. So I think that consistency is one of the things that is really helpful. I think also we'll survey our audience occasionally to understand what topics are interesting to them, what the demographics are of the people that are actually listening. So that's helpful. And I think that just overall, just making sure that you're trying to get in the head of the person, of your target audience. And if you can speak to them in a way that uses their language and uses the challenges that they're facing, then they're just like, these guys are in my head. They're like sitting in my office next to me. They see the challenges that I'm facing. I'm going to keep tuning in because I know that I'm going to get some little nugget of insight each time. And that's kind of how I feel about the CMO huddles, honestly. That's why I keep coming back to them, because I get that same experience.
The little nuggets. I love it. All right. Well, we'll come back to both your comments on CMO huddles and the continuing this, but we're going to now introduce Andrés Roselló, the head of global marketing at Cognex Corporation. Hello, Andrés. Wonderful to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
So, and where are you today?
At our global headquarters, Natick, Massachusetts, just 10 miles west of Boston.
All right. Well, we've moved from the middle of the country to the east. Maybe you can help educate the folks on what describe Cognex for us in a sentence or two.
Sure. 40-year-old company. We empower companies primarily that make things or move things to improve their productivity with vision. So machine vision is a combination of hardware, think of cameras, and increasingly AI-powered software to inspect and identify packages and products going through production facilities.
Oh, okay. Wow. It's interesting. And I'm imagining that your customers, these are big deals that you're doing, and we're talking about a lot of factors that go into the sale of Cognex.
Surprisingly not. So let's say we're a component of the automation space. So if you think about large industrial companies, a lot of investment over the last decades in automating and investing in technology. We play a small role in that, which is the vision within an automation capability. So we might have large deals with those automation production companies to be integrated into their larger systems, but many times it's thought of as an after component. So I have a production facility, a production process. I've identified a problem somewhere on the line, and vision can help improve that process. Maybe I can remove a manual person inspecting the component and use AI-powered cameras to solve for those problems. So in those cases, the buying committee is relatively small, maybe 2 or 3 people, and these deal sizes are in the $25K range, somewhere around that. So they're not the kind of enterprise deal where you're dealing with the CIO and months of negotiation. Shorter buying cycles, smaller committees, and smaller buying sizes.
So how do you define top of the funnel at Cognex? Because it's interesting. I mean, you could be, in some ways, you're a component of a larger solution. And so talk about just how you define it.
Yeah, it is really that what some might define as above the funnel. That's how we think of our top of the funnel. It's really helping with that problem awareness as opposed to the solution awareness, or as others have defined, kind of creating demand as opposed to capturing demand. So in that area, how do we get companies to enter the category, to number one, understand and acknowledge that they have a problem? I have a benefit of inherited as a 40-year-old company that has high brand awareness and a strong brand reputation in our category. So we invest 3-4x in R&D than any of our competitors. So we're known as the premium solution provider, and so that benefit affords me. I just need to get people to enter the category, and once they get in there, I have some amount of confidence that they'll find us. So it's really about helping them understand they have a problem, and there are now new solutions to it, and that's a change really recently in our industry, as AI, as it's infused almost every segment of the markets. It's infused our market as well. So over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot more AI going into our cameras, and that's rapidly expanding what's possible. What are the types of problems that we can solve? And so a lot of the education effort is there. Things that were unsolvable or not solvable without spending huge amounts of money and time are now solvable with relatively easy solutions that can be set up in days.
First of all, it's really cool to be thinking about this this vision area, but I just want to pause, and for those folks that are not at 40-year-old companies who don't have awareness, I mean, what a luxury to be able to just focus on the problem, knowing that you're going to get more than your fair share of those folks looking. Once they learn about the problem and understand the solutions, there's a decent chance they're going to find you, right? And it's like, whereas everybody else has to say why they're better than you, you have that luxury. So do you have a sense then, so given that it's all about the problem, what are your sort of biggest drivers from a top of the funnel standpoint?
Yeah, it's organic SEO that and primarily in written content. We've tried a couple of other channels. Maybe time to take a swing at them again. I know the last couple of years, audio and podcast have become a hot topic. But for us, it's that written and video educational top content of what is the category, what is machine vision, what's automation, how do I improve my production quality, my production throughput. It's engaging in those conversations that are happening in the market, and really being finely attuned to the language of our customers. And in all of the categories that we play, they use slightly different language. If you're at a logistics company like Amazon, they use slightly different language than a manufacturing company like Ford, even though they're talking about similar problems. So really being finely attuned to the way that they speak and the way they think about their production and logistics processes, and participating in those conversations with a keyword strategy.
And this feels like very long tail search. I mean, there might only be 200 people searching for you that machine vision for X. And if that was the language that they used, then you got to create a lot of content, a lot of pages.
Yeah. And maybe I'd make a distinction there that we do have a long tail strategy, but I think of that more in the kind of middle bottom of the funnel. Once you've gone down to the point of how do I solve a specific solution for a specific type of problem, I've gotten a sense that they understand they have a problem and there's a really specific need that they're trying to solve. Most of what we think about in the top of the funnel is that really top of the level educational of what is the category, what is measurement, what's vision, what's automation. These are categories that are much larger than ours. We just play a small role in them. But if perspective, or if companies are out there thinking about what is automation and what are the tools, we want them to be aware that there's a category that might help them in a new and different way. So
I'm thinking about SEO and organic SEO. And we're now in this moment of, I was at Forrester conference, and the CEO in his opening remarks said, Google will die. He didn't give a time frame, but he said Google will die. And it certainly was got everybody's attention, and they sat up. I think that the time frame may be longer than he wanted anybody to believe there, but nonetheless, search is going to change. And I'm wondering how, if at all, you're thinking about, gee, well, if search is changing and ChatGPT is the new search engine, how does that impact your strategy?
Yeah, the analysts have a knack for being provocative in certain areas. Certainly, George does at Forrester. We have been looking at it. Bing has taken a leap ahead as it relates to kind of AI powered search results. Google is fast follow. We've been playing around with some of their demos that they're sharing to groups, and one learning that we've had from that, and I think it's always been an important topic to try to land the snippet or try to land that spot, and I think that will be increasingly important as we look at the kind of types of results that these search engines will be providing back. It's less about the list and more about curating a response and giving that response to you. And so I think what had been important before of can we show up in the top page, that still matters. But more importantly, can we be the answer to the question? And I think as we look forward to the kind of ChatGPT AI-powered search response, the answer to the question will matter a lot more. And so focusing on the type of content and the structure of the content that will afford us that spot.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think there's going to be, for better or for worse, there's going to be a fair amount of what we'll call it flooding of these tools to sort of train them. And that'll be another area that'll be interesting. I think it's both controversial and one might call it opportunistic, but we'll see how that shapes things as well. As these machine learning the really language, what do they call it? Large language models. How are they going to learn? Right? Well, they're going to probably learn from brands. So anyway, all right. Well, very cool. We'll come back to this, but let's now welcome Kevin Briody, CMO of Edmentum and star of episode 29 of the predecessor to this show, Renegade Marketers Live. Hello, Kevin. Welcome back.
Thanks, Drew. I love being characterized as the star of anything. So
there you go. Yes, you are a star. And where are you today?
I am in Greensboro, North Carolina, my home office. We're actually headquartered out of Minneapolis, but really, like a lot of companies, since the pandemic went remote first. So we're all over the place.
Awesome. All right. Well, now we sort of moved south in our geography, spanning the country here today. So give us a brief description of what Edmentum does.
So Edmentum is a K-12 learning technology company. So we do digital curriculum assessments, professional instructional services for about 6 million students, if I get the numbers right, for 400,000 educators. And we work with across about 11,000 schools, districts, and other educational institutions in all 50 states and worldwide.
Okay. Very cool. So, and it's funny because we've moved from sort of automating factories and warehouses to now how do we sort of automate education in some sense? Not that's probably poor choice of words, but so given that you've got end users of students and you've got teachers who need to implement this, and then you've got school districts who I imagine have to buy it, what's top of funnel look like for you?
Well, it's interesting for us because top of funnel, I mean, there's a big distinction between our typical user and our buyer. Our user is obviously the students, but in many ways we consider our primary customer in terms of who uses our tools, and really what our company is built around, whose lives we're making better, is the educator, is the teacher. So to some degree, our top of funnel is connecting with those teachers and those educators, is making sure that what we're putting out is relevant to them, and we're showing up when they're thinking about how they approach helping their students and connecting with their students. But then our buyer is very much typically people in what we consider building level or school level administration, like principals, assistant principals, folks like that, or more often people at the school district level. So the top of funnel for us is making sure we're connecting with people who are either buyers in the superintendent's office or people who are part of their buying group, influencers, which are very often the teachers as well as other people in the administrative office there.
And so that's a lot. I mean, that's a big universe because,
Yes.
and very different. I mean, in some sense, everybody has the same goal, which is to educate better. But the teacher, if they are embracing it, that's a good thing. And obviously they can say, I want this. And then the educator says, well, we don't have funding this year, but maybe next year. And also they have to recognize that there's a problem that you solve that they want solved. So
Right.
again, help us sort of, how do you build and get to that audience?
Well, I think for us, I mentioned our buying group traditionally, it's a pretty diverse audience. It's pretty broad as well. So a lot of people who have influence in those purchase decisions. And certainly when we're talking in the United States in K-12 education, there's a political element too. Superintendents report to school boards, and so budgets are driven that way. So there's different factors there, but it's really, to your point, it's for the different audiences is from a marketing perspective is finding ways to speak to their particular needs and pain points. You mentioned about like, oh, we don't have budget this year versus next year. We live in a highly seasonal buying cycle. The vast majority of decisions around contracts and RFPs and purchase decisions are really made in a pretty tight window in our industry that takes place in the United States and, really late spring, early summer. And so right in the midst of where we are now. So for us, top of funnel is connecting with those people who influence those buying decisions year round to make sure we're top of mind as they're doing that early research, as they're poking around and trying to understand how the different vendors can solve some of their needs, and then also making sure we're right there, top of mind for top of consideration during this kind of really critical buying window.
And so I'm imagining, so we have the steady stream, and then it's April, and it's like, these folks must be inundated by everybody else who understands that they're buying right now. And again, I'm at that point in time, they're no longer top of the funnel, right? Because in theory, they may or may not be, they may be in the process of buying. They're certainly going to buy something because they have.
If we're not already on their radar, in their consideration set by this time of the year, it's going to be hard for us to really get in there. I think but I mentioned it's seasonal, and it goes back to what you said. When you think about top of funnel, it's about putting content out or running events or whatever the tactic is that speak to their needs at that moment. And so, for example, when back to school rolls around, we know a big challenge in the United States has been teacher shortages, and what can companies do to support schools and districts as they wrestle with how do we have gaps in our teaching schedule, or how do we reduce some of the burn and churn on individual educators. That's going to be very top of mind in the fall as schools kick back in, or at the start of second semester in January. So it's about finding ways to connect with them year round, but in context of what their particular pain point or need or worry is at that exact moment. So as I mentioned, it's a very seasonal calendar for us, very closely mapped to the school year. And it's just about staying top of mind and in front of them, year round. So we're well set up for this critical, second quarter buying season.
So is there any, from a tactical standpoint, something that is working better than you expected in terms of top of the funnel, sort of making sure that, and these are such difficult things to measure, but making sure that when we get to the buying moment, they are aware of you, they understand the solution, and you're on the list. Is there anything that's sort of from the top, that starts the conversation off really, really well?
Well, I think it's perhaps not surprisingly better. It's a tried and true. And Andrés did a really nice job speaking to the power of organic and the value of really good content marketing. I've been a big fan of content marketing for years. I think it has a lot of potential power, and a lot of companies, particularly in the B2B space, make a ton of use of it. I think a lot of it is, in our industry, it's particularly in the U.S. domestic market, education is highly, highly local. it's really 50 little countries who all have their own policies, their own needs, their own pain points. There's some shared needs that they have. Like I mentioned, teacher retention and shortages is a big challenge, or learning loss, or things like that. But the nuances of it and how we might help are highly local. And so a lot of what we do and where we've seen good success is trying to put out good content, good research, different things that will resonate for their potential local needs. So as they're searching for that, they find us, we show up well, and we can kind of get them into the top of funnel and get into that consideration set. So it's a tried and true. So it's nothing, earth-shatteringly shocking. And a lot of times organic and SEO can be a bit of a slow burn effort, but we've seen a lot of success there. And I think it's something we're continuing to focus on.
And so I'm just sort of wrapping my mind around thinking about, even within 50 states, if we said those are 50 different countries, even by county, they could be different countries. And the way they think about and solve their challenges, and what kind of challenges that they have. So I guess that the sort of last question before we go to a little pep talk on CMO Huddles, I'm curious, is there there's so much noise at the top of the funnel, right? In terms of, for almost every brand, there's a lot of people who they visit the website, they check out a piece of content, they may or may not sign up for a newsletter, right? And any way that you found that you can sort of separate and go, this is real, this is funnel material, and this is just,
Well, I think as in the earlier conversation you had just had, you mentioned, the hot topic on everyone's mind in marketing of generative AI and ChatGPT and the impact that's going to have on SEO, for example. And I think what we've been seeing for years, but certainly with ChatGPT is just exploding, is just flooding the zone with low quality content.
Yeah.
There's so much noise. It's going to get a million times worse over the coming months and years as the tools get better, as people get, start to embrace it more. So I think it's really the brands that are going to stand out are the ones that focus on quality. They're the ones that focus on providing actual value and not just well-optimized copy. And I think it's really speaking to, again, as Andrés said, I'm keep stealing his stuff, but really speaking to how we're answering the critical questions. So for us, it is about, we're talking about efficacy research and impact research. Our customers, their work isn't, they're not selling something as much. Their work is affecting the lives of students. They need to know what they're doing, the tactics they're using, the tools they're using actually works. And so efficacy research is massive for us. And so that's the kind of content people are looking for. It answers their questions. That's how you stand out amongst the noise, is you got to focus on real substance and quality. And maybe it's optimistic, but my belief is that's the kind of stuff that will continue to rise above.
I think you're right. It's funny. We are running a test right now, partnering with a content specialist, and it's running on renegade.com, where we have content human only, human and bot only content to see. And we're doing a lot of it over the next month and a half to see which wins. And already there's pretty clear indication that the human works better, which is obviously reassuring to a lot of writers out there. But I think the other point that you make, the efficacy research, the difference, that's custom research that you have that no one else has that can educate the market. And I want to just make sure that that's different than a blog post.
Right.
That is a significant investment. And I think what you're going to see is big content pillars like research are going to be the things. And then where AI will come in is taking that research and turning it into lots of little iterations. It's still original content, but you'll be able to use that in a lot more faster in a lot of different ways. All right, enough of me. Let's take a minute and talk about CMO Huddles, which we launched in 2020. CMO Huddles is an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO describes Huddles as a cross between an executive workshop and a therapy session. And given how hard things are getting out there, who doesn't need a little reassurance that they're not alone? Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions. Since no CMO can outwork this crazy job, CMO Huddles is here to help you outsmart it. So as it happens, Jeff, Andrés, Kevin, you're all in Huddles. One quick question. Are you on the therapy side or the executive workshop side?
I'm on both as well. I like the therapy, and I like the tips and ideas that I get from all the other awesome CMOs.
Question for you. I'm just wondering, is there a specific, because we get asked this question, maybe all of you could answer, if you have a specific example of something that happened in either, attending a huddle or reading a report or something that's really specifically helped you on a challenge.
I can just to chime in on that. And I just what Jeff said, I'm a little bit of therapy and workshop. I think it's a great environment to kind of hear from people who are dealing with similar challenges, and know you're not alone is also useful. But I think a good example I would have is I'm without throwing a vendor pitch out, but one of the challenges in our field is when you need a new vendor, how do you sort from the noise? We're marketers, so we get all the inbound marketing tactics against us as well. And so Huddles actually has got a great Slack channel. There's some good advice going back and forth on well-vetted vendors in different spaces. And so we found a great production partner for a particular project that we needed through a CMO Huddle recommendation from about 2 or 3 other CMOs who had already used them as well. So I think it's at the risk of inviting spam, that was a really helpful thing.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate that. Andrés, Jeff, anything in terms of specifics that have come to mind where Huddles has been helpful?
Yeah, and I give a recent Huddle member, but and I've attended the live workshops, and I've attended these virtual events that are really helpful. But also, Drew, my conversations with you had the opportunity to catch up with you for 30 minutes and get your thoughts, which was half therapy session and half executive guidance. So yourself a really brilliant marketer, and you have a ton of experience, and so just having that access to you has been a great benefit to me.
As long as my wife isn't hearing this episode, that's fine, because she definitely worries about my head being able to fit through the door on the way out. But thank you, Andrés. Awesome. Let's see. Anything else, Jeff? Anything else?
I'd just say on the therapy side for me, one of the things that opened my eyes was I attended one of the huddles that was for people in transition. I'm not personally in that mode right now of my career, but it made me realize that I needed to spend more time on my personal brand, because for all of us that day will come, and investing now is going to make it way easier. And so that was like something that like lit a fire under me that wasn't there before. And then tactically, I just the session that we had where we talked about using ChatGPT was particularly helpful from a tactical perspective, and in sharing many of the insights I got that with my team. We've been more effective since listening to that session. So I've taken away lots of great stuff.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the three of you and the comments. I'm going to make one note, Jeff, on the transition team. We've been supporting CMOs in transition for 3 years, and you're absolutely right. One of the things that I have noticed is that CMOs don't pay attention to their personal brand until they're in transition, which is way too late. So we did spend an entire month on personal branding, and we actually have another individual coming in, I think, towards the end of the month, talking about easy ways of doing it. All right. Well, if you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, check out CMOHuddles.com. All right, let's get back to this conversation. And we're in top of the funnel, and we've talked a lot about, and we've talked about content and SEO as the big driver there. And we're just keep moving along and maybe get down the funnel a little bit. How are you assessing and qualifying? And I don't even want to use the word leads, because I know leads are a bad term in Huddle land now. We don't even want to talk about marketing qualified leads. We just want to talk about opportunities. However, they got to get from where they start the top of the funnel to an opportunity. Can you talk about any sort of fast track mechanisms that you might have in terms of qualifying, or behaviors that you might see that say, okay, that's somebody, that's real. And I know it's going to vary by your market, but maybe Andrés, you could speak to that.
Sure. We've, since we invest so much in content and those digital channels, we spent a lot of time looking at what are the digital behaviors and how does that translate, or how can that inform where folks are in their buying process. And the one big aha for us is support content. Initially we thought, well, support content is for customers, and once they're a customer, they might go in there and download the CAD files or the installation guide and those bits. But what we found is that the majority of the traffic in there is from prospective customers. And as they get pretty close to their buying process, within 2 weeks, they start digging into those areas and downloading those guides and educating themselves on, if I buy this thing, what's it going to take to install it? How long is it going to take? What support do I need? What tools do I need? What integrations might I need? And so activity in that area of the site is a key indicator for us that they're ready, and we need to jump in.
That's so interesting. And I want to pause on that for a second, because they're ready to embrace, and they're really going through a process. And I think some companies may not anticipate that. They think, okay, we'll wait for the sales call. And I'm thinking about Brent Adamson and buyer enablement. That's exactly what that is, in an unexpected way, right? That should have been post-sale, but no, a smart buyer is thinking through the experience. So I'm wondering, and Kevin or Jeff, do you have a similar trigger that's helping you identify the wheat from the chaff, so to speak?
Yeah, similar to what Andrés said, I think mine is a little bit more anecdotal at this point than driven by the data. But it's support content to the extent of, for us, operate a platform and a set of tools that have to operate in a pretty tightly integrated environment. Most of our customers have a broad set of single sign-on tools and third-party platforms that are already in. And the last thing they want to do is add complexity to that. So, we've got some content up on the site that's really designed to support content around integrations and interoperability with these other platforms. But that's something we're pulling forward into more of our marketing content, because we're finding people are going to that, which is a good indication that we've passed some mental threshold for them, that we're now in their consideration set, and now they're digging in. So I think it's a good example where you look for, as a marketer, you like to think you're brilliant. You've got your high funnel content, your mid funnel, your low funnel, and you look for those triggers. But I think it's really cool to sometimes see those weird behaviors that maybe you weren't expecting. And then that's a great indicator of, people who are a little bit maybe closer to purchase decision than you thought.
Yeah, certainly no one is going to look at a manual or an integration thing if they're not seriously considering buying, which is kind of awesome. And Jeff, before we move on from that, you have anything that you've seen in your sort of funnel that's similarly indicative of a real opportunity versus, your...
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of support content. I hadn't thought of that, so we'll test that out. But the way that we're doing it is that I would say if there are specific assets, it would be pricing page views or pricing page requests. You might want to link to our pricing page, because I think we have kind of a unique way of trying to swap contact information for access to our pricing that I haven't seen before. So that's really good. And webinar attendance is always a good, because we use webinars as kind of our middle of funnel content. So we're pushing people into that. So those are two good triggers. But in addition to that, we also have a pretty robust lead scoring program. So we've got an ICP score and we've got an engagement score, and we put those together in like what we call a matrix score, so we can sort every lead in our system based off of how good of a fit they are for us, how likely they are to buy, versus how engaged have they been in our content and our social media programs. And that has really allowed our SDR team to have a great prioritization list for outbound calling, and to move people through the buying cycle from like just kind of an interest stage into like the actual buying funnel.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to the website, and the pricing thing is funny. I was reading, Trust Radius just had a new report on sort of buyer behavior, and they're calling it the self-service buyer, and going all in on that. And pricing pages are really important, and there's just no doubt about it. And this notion of really anticipating every single thing and that a real buyer would want to go through, and understanding that seems both obvious and profound at the same time. And I really appreciate, Andrés, your insight there. The other thing I was thinking back on is in a previous show, one of the huddlers shared the number of little demos that they offered, and it was a lot. And so whatever your personal sort of experience and need, and I'm thinking again with the educators, the end user, they're going to want to know, what's this experience going to be like? How hard is it for me to use, right? And so closer they can get to the product, it might matter. Okay. So just a quick thing on when they identify themselves. So Andrés, we'll go back to your example of they're looking at the manuals. How important is speed at that point to you? So they're like, that's a off the chart, bingo, bing, they're ready. Is that the moment where your salesperson really needs to be, calling them? And how important is speed in this one?
Yeah, it matters to probably a minority of our customers. Speed matters. So if you think about production facilities, something broke, something went wrong. For those customers, it is DEFCON 5. They need to get it solved this week. And we do have I have the benefit again of inheriting a large SDE or lead development team within my marketing organization, and that team's responsibility is to be that first touch and do a lot of that outreach. Our general sales cycle, so we do about 30 days from a lead or campaign member to an opportunity, and about another 30 days from opportunity to close. So the windows generally aren't that tight for that minority except for that minority of customers where there's urgency. But our SDEs are that first touch point, and when they see those kinds of motions, they're flagged, and they're the ones doing the outreach.
Got it. Wow. I have to say that if we had the entire CMO Huddles community, they would be jealous right now, Andrés, of that 2 month from raising their hand to close. I mean, so many folks have a 1 to 2 year sales cycles right now, and they're getting longer. Any other comments on speed, Kevin or Jeff?
Well, we're all about speed to lead with what we do. Anytime somebody fills out a lead form that indicates that they might be interested in buying our product, and usually that comes in the form of either a pricing request or an actual demo request, our SDR team's calling them within 5 minutes. And there's a lot of research around that showing that if you call them within 5 minutes, that you have a 90% higher likelihood of actually getting in contact. So I'm like really into speed to lead, and I push it really hard with our sales team, and try to make sure that we maximize the opportunities that are raising their hand.
Yeah. And it could be very frustrating, but go ahead, Jeff. I mean, Kevin, sorry.
I was just going to build off that. I think that is critical. I haven't used the phrase speed to lead, but I'm going to steal that from my team now. I think it's critical because if you have a prospective customer or someone in the buying group, an influencer, they're doing the research, they've reached out to you, they're probably on 4 other competitors' websites doing the same. Someone's going to get back to them first. Someone's going to spark that conversation. And it may not be the definitive thing, but for us, partnership we're not just a vendor, we're a partner. That sort of language is a huge part of our brand. So that responsiveness is where it starts. And so I think it's hugely, speed is not just for, tier 1 prospective large clients, but for everyone who might engage with us, you got to get back to them super fast and start that conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking. every element of the experience defines sort of what the expectations of your customer are. And so in Andres's example, it's like, oh, these are manuals that I can read and get value out of, and they've anticipated all my questions. Or, Kevin, the speed of response is an indicative that you will be responsive when they buy it. So yeah, it's interesting to be thinking about that. And this is where the integration of marketing and sales becomes so important, right? And I think it's just, this makes the job so complicated in the sense that now, all right, you've done your job, you built the funnel, you got them to sign up, look, their demo, and yet you can't stop, right? And I guess it just makes me curious how you, and Andres, you answered the question, your BDs do that, but how do you make sure that the organization is set up to respond at the speed that they need to have?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the comments from Jeff and Kevin, and kind of really setting the expectations for the experience of the brand. And this is a critical touch point, maybe the first touch point that you'll have with them. And if you've done a great job of setting that expectations that we're a responsive company, you can trust us, we'll be here. Then that just immediately took my head to, can we deliver on that expectation through the rest of the customer journey? Gave me a little bit of anxiety, but I think a huge opportunity for a company to differentiate itself in that way.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's like, oh, can I really? And I think about that a lot for CMO Huddles. Is we set expectations, and then can you deliver on those at every step? I'm curious. In this, we've talked about some of the things that you all have done to build top of the funnel, and things you've done that indicate at least that they're real versus fake. Are there any things that you thought would work, an experiment perhaps, that you tried that worked really well, or something that you tried that just didn't work at all?
Yeah, I've got an example where, I've been in this role for about 1.5 years now. My previous company I was in a similar role for about 4 years. And in that previous company, it was a very research-driven organization, well-established thought leader brand. And as a result, webinars were hugely powerful for us, major audiences. Certainly we benefited. Webinars as a channel, took off when the pandemic hit as an unfortunate byproduct of people not being in the office or attending in-person events. But even before that, massively powerful channel for us in terms of top of funnel, in terms of driving engagement. When I came here, it's a fundamentally different company in a different market with different challenges and a different reputation and engagement level with our audience. And so we did some experiments on thought leadership webinars. We still do them. We still find a lot of value in the recordings for on demand to add value and depth to our email campaigns and whatnot. But that was an early experiment when I first came on board and tried to bring a tactic from a previous company that didn't work as well as I thought it would. And it was simply because, we're at a different position and our audience was expecting different things from us as a brand.
Right.
And so it didn't quite pan out as well as I thought. Again, still experimenting with it, but it was something that was, high hopes, and then had to temper that pretty fast.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I'm just thinking about AI again. And since you are still doing them, there's really now so many tools available to sort of slice and dice and reuse that content. So there may be value later on down the road, even if it's not as immediate, assuming that topic in general was of interest. Anybody else have something they tried that didn't work as well?
Well, I have one that worked that I was surprised worked.
Okay, great. Let's go there.
I was highly skeptical of doing an email newsletter that was based mostly on curated content. I just thought no one cares about curated content. Like, there's so many different ways to get content these days. I can't imagine that this could be effective. But we decided to test it anyway. And we have found that it's it's not as effective as our podcast, but it's probably our second most effective top of funnel audience building and audience engagement tool. we've got tons, a pretty high open rate and lots of clicks, and that's a great way to score our leads. And so it's been way more successful than I could have ever hoped. And you don't have to put a lot of effort into curated content. It's just finding the right stuff and make sure it's in line with what your target audience wants. And especially with ChatGPT, you can write those summaries really quick and easy to execute. Lots of value. So
amazing. Well, and I think the key part there is that you're curating based on your sort of, we'll call it local knowledge, industry knowledge. So whoever is doing the curating is demonstrating that. And again, what we're talking about with ChatGPT is not original content, but augmentation, making it faster. It's your stuff and then adding value to it. All right. Well, I always on the show say, what would Ben Franklin say? We're running out of time, but I think what he would say is this is the age of experiment, because even though there's a lot of things that are tried and true. Webinars worked at one place, but didn't work at another. So you've got to keep, curated newsletters seem like they're passé, but no, maybe they might work in this situation. All right. Real quick, any metrics that, that measuring top of the funnel and how you're getting better at it. And is there anything that comes to mind?
Audience size.
Audience size. Okay. And we're talking reach at that moment relative to your total ICP. What percentage of that are you getting? Great. Kevin, Andrés?
I would say, we use a similar basket of metrics as probably most do. And so, for us, it's starting at the top and just an engaged metric within the target segments that we care about. So it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Andrés?
Organic traffic, and within that area of channels, we've been finding a lot of success with video being a driver. So thinking of YouTube if you just think about YouTube as a search engine and thinking about putting your content there, we've been pretty successful and are investing a lot more in that type of content. Think about all the content, all the communications that we want to deliver, and constantly asking ourselves, could this message be delivered more effectively, efficiently via video? And just thinking about that in every piece of content.
Got it. Video. All right. Amazing. A lot of wonderful tips in this and top of the funnel. Let's do a quick summary, maybe one do and one don't from each of you when it comes to top of the funnel marketing. And we'll start. Let's start with Kevin.
I could probably sum it up in a line my team is probably sick of me saying, but it's a little tagline of, do fewer things exceptionally well to drive greater impact. I think that the do and the don't is focus, especially top of funnel. There's a broad temptation that next channel, one more tactic, one more campaign is, that's what we need to do. And there's a real risk of diffusing your impact and then overwhelming your team in terms of, you need to give your team the headspace to be creative and strategic and focus on the stuff that works. So really just relentlessly focus and keep things simple so you can be more creative and strategic.
I love it. Jeff?
I'd say do focus on consistency in terms of audience building. I found the most important thing is that you got to do it build an expectation around the frequency of the contact with your audience, and you have to deliver well each time. And so I really agree with Kevin in terms of not spreading yourself too thin, focusing on one or two things that really seem to work well is better than doing 100 different things that are all, because there's a lot of possibilities, but only certain ones are going to be really resonant with your target audience. So
awesome. All right. Avoiding the peanut butter effect, the big theme. Andrés?
I think thinking about and with a mind towards organic search and that traffic, thinking about that featured snippet. So that's a Google term about how you land on that spot. But I think as we move into a world of more AI powered search, that's the kinds of results that will get delivered. And so thinking about creating the content, landing in that spot. That featured snippet, I think, will be increasingly important across the search engines, and trying to deliver content that answers it, whether that be in written form or video form, doesn't matter. But that kind of response to questions. And I think for the don't for me, if I can pivot to that area, would be the vanity metrics. When I started, that was a lot of the pat ourselves on the back of, we got 8.3 trillion impressions on something, and we found it didn't matter. There wasn't a high correlation between that and what we were trying to deliver to the business. So take that stuff off your dashboard.
I love it. It just reminds me, I think we're going to need to do a show just on SEO and the future of SEO. So, but thank you for that. Those. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, Andrés, Kevin. You're all great sports. And thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we will be talking about what CMOs need to know about cybersecurity with Laura McGregor, Michael Callahan, and Dan Loudon. Cue the music. At CMO Huddles, please visit cmohuddles.com. I'm your host, Drew Nizer, and until next time, keep on sharing, caring, and daring each other to